Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. Welcome back, miners. Time for another morning cup of joe.
Hi, I'm Amber Johnston, counselor at Student Wellbeing.
And I'm Nathan Asbell, a counselor at Student Wellbeing.
And today we're going to talk about emotions and what Star Wars can teach us about our emotions. We all have emotions we call good emotions, like happiness, joy, and love. And we all have emotions we call negative emotions, like fear, sadness, and anger. We call them negative emotions because they make us feel bad, but in reality, no emotion is good or bad. It's how they are perceived and the potential to use them against other people. Negative emotions are just warning lights like we see on a dashboard. They just tell us something's wrong. So what do you think Star Wars can teach us about those negative emotions, Nathan?
Well, I think there's lots of different parallels of emotions in the Star Wars franchise. For example, the light side and the dark. Bad emotions lead to suffering. Good emotions that lead to control and temperance. And the emotions that the Jedi use in order to bring about order in the galaxy.
Right. So in Star Wars, letting your emotions get out of control was a path to the dark side. And we can see that really starting in the early parts of the prequel series, where Anakin starts becoming more jealous and angry. And it was part of his descent into the dark side.
Yeah, he kept having Force visions of like his mother being killed or dying. And then he goes and he finds his mother and he slaughters an entire group of people in his anger. And there's a particular scene where Yoda feels through the Force that he feels Anakin's suffering. Great, great suffering. So there is a time when Anakin was very young that he starts to have these very dark, considered to be dark feelings and emotions.
Negative emotions, the part of what Star Wars teaches us is that negative emotions can be used as weapons against other people. And you notice that from the Emperor telling Anakin to hold on to his anger and to use it. And that's a bad thing. That's the source of their dark force powers.
Absolutely. Use your anger. Strike me down. I mean, he tells Luke Skywalker that in Episode 6 repeatedly. Use your anger and strike me down. Or strike. It tells him to strike down Vader and join him at his side.
Right, exactly. And so what are some ways that people use anger in real life as a weapon?
I've seen people, and have discussed it with people in counseling about how anger can be used to force others to behave or act or do things in a certain way. So I've had young ladies come in and say to me, hey, I don't want to do this or say this because it'll make my boyfriend angry. Mm-hmm. And they start to avoid situations or things where they would assert themselves and exert their power because perhaps their boyfriends would be angry. I've had other instances where I've had people come to my office and they exert anger on others to try to get their wants and wishes to be done.
Right. And we can do that not only with anger, but we also do that with sadness and guilt and fear. We can pull those emotions and make the other person feel bad for what we're feeling inside and influence their actions. So what it comes down to is the root of it is some of us use our negative emotions as a source of power and as a way to get other people to do the things we want to do.
I would agree with that. I can also see what we deem to be positive emotions also being weaponized. And so if you don't do what I want, then I won't make you happy. Mm-hmm. If you don't do what I want, then I won't spend time with you and I won't do these things that I know cause you happiness and joy. And so there's that stonewalling, that withdrawing, that leaving and that fleeing part of a way of punishing someone for not complying with what you want in terms of reducing their joy and happiness. And so I think that joy and happiness can also be weaponized in that way as well.
Right. They can withhold those things from you. They withhold their approval or their joy, their happiness in order to get you to manipulate you into doing what they want. So another thing that Star Wars teaches us is that negative emotions can get out of control. In episode 3, Anakin hurts Padme accidentally. He was trying to save her, but he got so upset and so caught up in his fear and his frustration and anger that he accidentally hurt her, and she ends up going into labor and dying.
Right, that's the scene where Obi-Wan Kenobi shows up, and he's like, "What did you do?"
Right.
And Anakin then, of course, part of that negative emotional feedback loop, starts to cast blame at his former master, Obi-Wan Kenobi, because Obi-Wan recognized his path towards using those negative emotions and weaponizing them and causing them to be a major bane in his existence and in his life.
Right, and he was definitely jealous of the relationship between Padme and Obi-Wan. And so he was using his anger and his fear about the relationship that Padme and Obi-Wan had, his fear about the Jedi Council finding out about his relationship with Padme, and he was using all of that as a source of power, and that's what led his descent into becoming Darth Vader. So when we use our anger as a weapon, it becomes a shotgun instead of a laser. And instead of just hurting the person he had aimed it at, which was Obi-Wan, he ends up hurting Padme as well, and he hurts himself.
Well, not only that, I mean, if you look at the actions of Anakin set up by whom we'd find out is basically Darth Sidious, he destroys and his anger ends up consuming the Jedi Council. And so that one moment, that one instance where Anakin becomes jealous and angry and goes and kills the younglings in that horrible scene where he goes and he becomes Darth Vader after killing Samuel Jackson's character in the scene where he's fighting Darth Sidious. I mean, all these moments lead up to the death of the Jedi Council, the death of the Jedi Order, all of the Jedi being strewn about the galaxy and hidden, the several numbers of them that were actually able to hide, like Yoda and Obi-Wan. And so our anger and our emotions out of control can have direct implications for us, but they can also have societal implications and implications that happen here at the university on a university scale, or in a community scale, a state scale, or even a nationwide scale. Look at some of the protests that are happening or have been happening recently in the past year or two, and you can see that anger and frustration and hatred and jealousy can lead to a lot of different negative effects for us as a nation.
Right. And the next thing that it teaches us is that emotional manipulation can make us ugly. Maybe not physically ugly like the Emperor, but emotionally. The more that Darth Sidious embraced this dark side, the more disfigured he became. Emotionally, we start becoming like that. And the more we embrace emotionally manipulating other people, the more that other people don't want to be around us and they don't like us. And he started out as Senator Palpatine, and he was a normal looking guy. But by the time you get towards the time that A New Hope started, between the end of episode 3 and into episode 4, you start seeing him warping into this very disfigured person. And emotionally, that was what was happening to him as he fell deeper and deeper into the emotional manipulation.
What's interesting is that some people might argue that his disfiguration came from his duel he had with Samuel Jackson's Jedi character, where he used his lightsaber and reflected back Darth Sidious's Force lightning back onto his face. But that Force lightning is nothing more than a representation of his own hate. And so that hate was reflected back to him, and it just accelerated the process that was already starting to happen. And so that hate was eating him up. It was causing him to have disfigurement and changes to his body, to his personality, to who he was. In episode 1, he seemed like a kindly old grandfather.
Right.
And by the time episode 3 happened, he was truly the insidious character Darth Sidious is. And so I think that you're right about that disfiguration coming from that hatred that flowed through him.
Well, he had even started, even before that battle with Samuel Jackson's character, even before that battle happened, you could start seeing the hollows beneath his eyes and his cheeks hollowing out and his face becoming paler and more gaunt. And you could see the effect it was already having. So yeah, it was his embracing of those dark emotions and feeding into his negative emotions was really, really driving him into it. The next part is embracing our negative emotions can hurt ourselves. And I touched on this a little bit earlier when I said that it was a shotgun. Because Anakin, he ended up losing everything. He lost his arms, he lost his legs, he lost his wife, he lost his children, he lost his mentor, he lost everything because he let himself blame others for how he felt, and he didn't properly diffuse his emotions.
Well, not only that, in that scene where Mace Windu is fighting the Emperor, that you see that his anger causes someone to directly lose their life right in front of him.
Right.
And that's the first time. And the second time, of course, is Padme, when she dies on the platform.
So, saying all that, it makes it kind of sound like those what we call negative emotions are the ones that make us feel bad. It starts to sound like those are just something we should just push down and repress. Isn't that kind of what Star Wars is teaching us?
Well, it's what the Jedi Order taught. It's like, do not feel those emotions. The Jedi typically did not get married and did not have kids. It was forbidden. Because if you had emotions, if you allowed yourself to be vulnerable and to feel love and to feel those sorts of things, then like love for a wife or something like that, then it could cause you problems. And so Anakin kept his love for Padme a secret. And I think that there are several times in the Jedi series where Jedi kept their relationships secret from people in order to protect them because of the forbiddenness, because of the code of the Jedi. And so the Jedi were all about suppressing a lot of their negative emotions. And yes, peace, calm, even the Force power battle meditation that you see Qui-Gon Jinn using right before he fights Darth Maul, right before, unfortunately, he dies. Even that power is all about the calm and the centering that the Jedi teach, which is positive. But the suppression of all their emotions and all the bad emotions, it becomes a major bane for them because feeling and allow yourself to feel negative emotions, banning those emotions means that you also ban and dam up your good emotions. Because sometimes the good emotions that you feel are a result of a bad emotion, or good emotions that you feel are a result from a bad emotion, and bad emotions that you feel can be a result of good emotions. So there's a great movie example of that in Inside Out. I'm sure we're going to do another podcast about that movie, but if you think about Inside Out, there's a scene where Riley misses a goal and loses this competition, hockey competition. And afterwards, her friends come and cheer her up, and it became this major joyous event, and it was like a party, and she felt all this love and goodness. But that only came after the tragedy of missing the shot and losing the championship and feeling horrible about herself and about her situation. Then came the joy in response to all of her friends showing up. So to repress all negative emotions limits the amount of joy and happiness, pleasure, and love that you can feel as well. So being able to experience and process both, I think, would have been very important for Anakin, would have been very important for each of us.
Right, because we notice with all of the Jedi, what ended up happening to them later in life. They all ended up isolated. Luke, after Kylo Ren started going into the dark side, Luke felt such guilt that he ended up isolating himself. And then you have individuals like Obi-Wan who had isolated himself. And yes, into a way, it was to watch Luke as he was growing up, but he also isolated himself from everyone else around him. And then we have On top of that, you have Yoda, who'd isolated himself. All of these different Jedi ended up living alone and living these very isolated lives. And part of that had to do with their guilt. You know, Obi-Wan over the guilt of Anakin's descent into the dark side. You had Yoda because of his guilt because of Anakin's descent to the dark side. And you have Luke's guilt over Kylo Ren's falling over to the dark side. And so all of these feelings that they felt, they never processed those and they never dealt with them, and they ended up living very lonely, very sad existences afterwards.
Right, so then I guess we should focus on, for about the next minute or so, what we can do in place of repressing all of our emotions and stuffing them, so to speak, and shoving them into a box.
I think the best thing we can do is if we're feeling something, we can talk about it. If we don't have somebody in our lives that we can talk about openly and honestly about what we're feeling, you're always welcome to seek counseling. We have the counseling office open in student well-being here at the university, and there's also outside counselors that you can seek through other means and methods. We have links on our website that you can look at different resources in the community.
Absolutely. And sometimes just being able to process it maybe on your own, if you're just having a moment in which you need to process. We've talked about this in our last podcast. You can do coloring, you can do drawing, you can do music, you can do art projects, you can do meditation. If you have the spell slots for the day, you can do maybe some exercise or spending time with friends, things that help you to process the negative emotions and energy that you have.
Absolutely, Nathan. We just have to make sure to process what we're feeling and be able to come out on the other side and deal with our feelings in appropriate and healthy ways. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you have a great day.
Take care and stay well.
For more information about mental health and wellness, contact Student Wellbeing at 204 Norwood Hall. And you can also give us a call at 573-341-4211.
The song Happy Days is brought to us by music from www.free-stock-music.com.